they said it's a fairness issue, that it's not fair to the boxers to make them compete against black boxers, I guess. So in other words, okay, if they were a football player or a baseball player, but we're not letting a black man have the chance to punch a white man. That's just not going to happen. Not at
Right.
Stanford.
How many of you know that Cal has a boxing team? It's been around for quite some time. It was founded way back in 1916 and happens to be the longest continuously established collegiate boxing program in the nation. And today, in our special Cal History episode, Leslie Mitchell joins the show to tell us all about a time when Stanford refused to compete against Cal because we had black students on the boxing team. Welcome to Tell the Whole Damn World. It's Monday, March 23rd, 2026. We have big news to report about two stellar freshmen from the Cal women's swimming and diving team and the women's gymnastics team. And it's another great day to be a bear. I'm your host, Reza Serafinijad. We appreciate you tuning in. And as I just mentioned, we want to congratulate Claire Weinstein from the women's swimming and diving team and Tanya Paulson from the women's gymnastics team. Claire won the national championship and broke the program record in the 500-yard freestyle at the 2026 NCAA Championships in Atlanta, Georgia. And Tanya had an incredible performance at the ACC Championships, becoming the first freshman in ACC history to win the all-around with a score of 39.425. She was named ACC Newcomer of the Year. We're the podcast that celebrates all things Cal. We produce on-camera interviews with the prominent people who are passionate about our university and our sports teams. If you're unabashedly and unapologetically all about Cal, you found the right place. We hope to put a smile on your face and help you come away feeling good about your connection to the greatest university on the planet. If you like what we're doing here, please take a moment to like, subscribe, and tell the whole damn world about us. We have a goal to get over 1,000 subscribers on YouTube and could really use your help in making that happen. And please be on the lookout for our latest 3-minute Cal Sports Report coming to you late this afternoon. Why 3 minutes? Because videos that are 3 minutes or shorter get wider distribution on YouTube. We're going to get right into it this week, so let me bring in Leslie, and together we'll learn all about Cal boxing and the infamous Stanford color line.
This week in Cal history.
Leslie Mitchell is our resident Cal history expert. She's a third-generation Cal alum, history major, and lifelong Golden Bear fan who writes great articles about the notable people connected with our university who have done great things in this world. You can visit her website, calbearshistory.com, or follow her on Twitter at calbearshistory to learn more about the people who have been a part of the rich history of the University of California. We couldn't be more lucky to have Leslie as part of the show. Today, Leslie and I are going way back to the 1920s to talk about Cal boxing and the Stanford color line. Welcome again to the show, Leslie.
Well, thank you, Reza. Yes, I mean, who would have expected we'd have a boxing episode? But this is, I think, an absolutely extraordinary story and something of which Cal can be very proud, particularly since Stanford can't.
And those are the stories we like the best.
Those are our best stories. Yeah, I just came across a mention of the Stanford canceling out boxing competitions between the schools at one point, and I got interested and I started looking it up, and there really wasn't any article about it or anything. So I went back to the newspapers that you can now fortunately get online, like the old San Francisco Chronicles and Oakland Tribunes and San Francisco Examiners and all those old papers to get the story, and the Daily Californians, which are now available through the library. And it's an amazing story. It's all about Stanford. Well, as the headline on my article says, or the headline on the San Francisco Chronicle said from that era, Stanford draws color line, cancels UC ring bouts. I love that, ring bouts, meaning boxing matches.
Right.
And Cal had a black boxer on our team, and Stanford refused to compete against him.
Yep.
And so it became a huge story that took over the papers and that took over the whole relationship between the schools for a while.
Right. Right. Well, I mean, as I understand it, I mean, we're talking about a completely different era in the world, in the United States, especially. And, there was widespread discrimination that was
Absolutely.
obviously everywhere you looked. But it's interesting to think that in sports in particular, that we had a black football player who was on the football team, Walter Gordon in particular, who was just a phenomenal player who went on to great professional success as well. We did a
He was our
story on
first
him earlier.
All-American, Walter Gordon.
Right.
Our first
Right.
black
And it's
player and our first All-American, so obviously, yeah, he was
right.
outstanding. Yeah, and he was also a boxer.
Right. Well, yes, exactly. And we'll get to that in a minute, but my point is just that sports in general is kind of the breaking ground where you push past these barriers. You just take a look at Jackie Robinson, of course, as well with baseball, and not that he was a Cal guy, but it's just in general, it's like sports leads the way and breaking through these barriers and helping the rest of society kind of play catch up.
Yeah, and, we started having boxing at Cal. I think 1907 was when they started the boxing team. They called it I gotta get this right, the Polydeucian Club, which I guess is some Greek thing. That was the first boxing team, and it was it's just like a club. Not really not certainly not a varsity sport because there was nobody to play or to compete against on other colleges, and you can't be a varsity sport unless you compete against another college or
Right.
university. So they competed against a lot of like little other clubs in San Francisco and the East Bay and so forth. And finally, in 1915, Stanford got a boxing team, and everybody at Cal was all excited, so we can finally compete against a university and especially our arch rival, and then we can be a varsity sport. And it was a source of great excitement, but there was a little problem as far as Stanford was concerned. Is that we had Walter Gordon was one of our boxers in 1916. Was going to be the first match, and it was going to be at Stanford. And by the way, he wasn't just a good boxer, Walter Gordon. He was the California state champion boxer,
Right.
like AAU champion. Also, the California state wrestling champion. I mean, he was an incredible athlete. By the way, he went on to become a federal judge, among many other things, and also a football coach at Cal.
Right,
Um,
and the governor of the Virgin Islands
the
even? Is
governor
that
of the
right?
Virgin Islands and
Right.
the head of the California Parole Board and all sorts of other. I mean, if the first African American graduate from our law school in Berkeley, so just
Right.
quite an amazing guy. I don't know how he had time to do all that stuff. Uh, but anyway, Walter Gordon was on the team, and the Stanford president called up Cal's president Wheeler and said, "If you send that black man down here, we're going to cancel the match. We're not going to play." And unfortunately, at that point, President Wheeler decided, well, we'll go along. And they
Yep.
substituted without telling anybody why. The coaches just told a different player, a guy named Don Lawton, said, "Well, you're going to go." And he was like, "Me? I'm not nearly as good as Walter Gordon.
Right.
Why am I going?" But they had no explanation. So that match was played with all white teams on both ends. The next year, the match was at Cal, and I guess the Stanford president didn't think he had the right to tell, Cal who they could and couldn't allow to play in their own gym. So they they agreed to the match, but I can imagine how frustrating this was. And by the way, the match was played in the basement of Old Harmon Gym, which was on the
Yes.
site of what is now Dwinell Hall, and
Right.
that's where the basketball was played, and then in the basement, they had the boxing. And it was a 3-3 tie, 3 bouts Stanford won, 3 bouts Cal won, so there was the 7th and final deciding match for who was gonna win, and Walter Gordon was the Cal boxer. It was a heavyweight match, and the Stanford, boxer, a guy named, Hugh McNulty, he defaulted because he was not going to box against a black man.
Right.
So Cal
Right.
won the match, but not very satisfying when they won't even compete. Although I don't think there's much doubt that the state boxing champion Walter
Oh,
Gordon would have won the
oh,
match.
absolutely.
You could make the
Right.
argument that they just didn't want to lose. They didn't want to lose to a black boxer. They might have been
Right.
um,
Right.
part of it.
Well, it's just interesting. I mean, this is obviously back in the early 1900s, but there was the much more recent thing, and it had nothing to do with racial discrimination. But when the Stanford rugby team refused to participate and play against Cal's varsity rugby team for fear of being injured and
Yeah, they had a
just pummeled,
I remember that. It was like 20 years
right?
ago, maybe. There was a scheduled
Something
game,
like
and
that,
Stanford just sent a message to Jack Clark saying, "Nah,
right?
we can't. We might get hurt playing you. You're too
I mean,
good."
like,
Well, then why
really,
did you
guys?
schedule the
This
match in the first place?
right. I mean, it's just it doesn't seem very sportsmanlike. I mean, you got to compete, and even if you might lose, you
Well,
just got to
yeah,
go
and
out there and at
as
least
Cal
try.
fans, we know that you might
That's
lose
exactly right.
matches.
That's
We've had
right.
that
We've
experience.
had our share of losing. I mean, come on, guys.
They
Well,
when
one thing I
they
wanted to jump in, sorry,
I'm
just
sorry.
Leslie, just before you let it go, just one little thing. And I loved in your article, and, kudos to you, by the way, for digging up all of this stuff on all of this that happened at that time. But you included a picture of the old Harmon gym. And I don't know if that was a real photograph or not. But this is,
Yes.
uh,
Yeah,
I
it's
mean,
a real
and wow, I
photograph.
mean, that was a majestic structure. It was really pretty awesome in the site of where the south wing, apparently, of Dwinell Hall currently resides, right?
Mhm,
But it
right.
really was a grand structure to be sure. And I was like, wow. That's just another cool thing I thought
I actually
for
wrote a
Cal
whole
students.
article about, the old
Hmm.
Harmon gym because it has a cool story. It was like the 4th building on the Cal campus.
Wow.
So yeah, it had quite a history in its day. And they eventually
Right.
tore it down because it was considered a fire hazard because it was all wood. So anyway, that's the story of the first problem of having a black boxer, and Stanford refused to compete. So then the next couple of years, there were no black boxers on Cal's team. So, there was no problem from Stanford's point of view. But then in 1922, there was another black boxer, a guy named Errol Jones. And we had the same thing again. They had a match in Berkeley, and Stanford came to the match, but they refused to box against Mr. Jones, and they defaulted that match. So the following year, 1923, this is when things get dramatic. The day before the match, this one was going to this was going to be at Palo Alto. It's going to be on the Stanford campus, and I guess Stanford had this belief that no black man's going to box on our campus, whatever you allow them to do in Berkeley. So the day before the match, which was March 8th, 1923, the Stanford athletic director, a guy named Barrow, W.H. Barrow, not to be confused with Barrows, who was the University of California president at that time. Anyway, Barrow announced to the press, to the San Francisco Chronicle, that the entire boxing match was being canceled because Cal had put this black boxer on the list, because I guess they exchanged lists of names of who the boxers were going to be the day before. So there were two black boxers on Cal's team, Marvin Johnson and Errol Jones, but it was Errol Jones was the only one that was on the card. So the athletic director from Stanford announced, no, Cal had promised us they weren't going to send any black boxers down here, and we don't allow black boxers down here. I mean, he said it more fancy than that.
I have his statement if you'd like me to read
Sure,
that.
go ahead.
Sure. Stanford has withdrawn from the boxing match as this step seems wisest under the existing conditions. But it is hoped that relations may be resumed another year if these conditions can be remedied. Boxing is, at best, a sport that calls for constant care to keep it above criticism and also calls for the best feeling between the participants. During the past few years, a number of points have arisen for discussion with regard to the eligibility of contestants, the conditions under which the bouts between white men and colored men, which from time to time apparently been settled, only to come up for discussion again. It sounds like
Basically,
a lot of
the
gobbledygook for this.
condition is, how dare you send a black boxer to our precious campus? And we thought
Right.
that we weren't going to have to deal with this again, and here we are. We have to deal with this again. Cal vehemently denied that they had ever made any such promise. And nobody,
Yeah.
I mean, who knows what comments might have been made by somebody to somebody. Of course, I believe that Cal never made any such promise, but
Yeah.
take it for
Yeah.
what it's worth. But Cal was not going to put up with it. I mean, Errol Jones is an interesting guy too, in and of himself.
Yes.
He grew up in Fresno, and when he was a teenager, he and his younger sister Hazel, they went to a movie theater in Fresno, and they were not allowed to sit in the white section. They were told that they had to go sit in the upstairs balcony where the black people were allowed to sit. And there was at that time a statute in California. In fact, it still exists. I'm a lawyer, and I've actually had this statute come up in some cases. The Civil Code Section 51.3 that barred discrimination in public places of public accommodation, which is restaurants and movie theaters and that kind of place. It went to court. They filed a lawsuit, the Jones family. The movie theater argued, well, Plessy versus Ferguson, which, as we all know, is the notorious case from the United States Supreme Court that made discrimination legal, separate but equal, as they called it, discrimination legal. And so this movie theater operator said, well, Plessy versus Ferguson, we don't have to let the black people be with the white people. And the Jones family relied on this California statute, says it doesn't matter what the US Supreme Court says, this is the law in California. And they won the case. And it went up on appeal, and they won the appeal, and it's a published decision, and it's still out there. And I looked it up, and it was cited as precedent as recently as 2020 as
Yeah.
as a binding precedent on the state of California. So, he Errol Jones did not back off, and his family did
Right.
not back off.
Right. Nor should he have. That's awesome. Good for him. Absolutely.
And so when Stanford said, "No, you can't play," he didn't like it, and his teammates, what's great is his teammates didn't like it, and the Cal community didn't like it. And they said, we're not gonna back off." And
Right.
it
Right.
became this giant thing. It's amazing to see the headlines of, like, the
Right.
Chronicle, "Stanford draws color line."
It all became very public all of a sudden. It just like became this big, big thing. And thanks to you, we're going to show everyone some of the newspaper headlines that you were good enough to collect and pass along to me so we can show that to our viewers. But yes, and the Daily Cal had this amazing thing to say. I'm not sure if you wanted to read it or if you'd like me to. It's
No, go
up to
ahead.
you on
Yeah, the Daily
just
Calc. Well, first,
yeah,
a little bit more of the
yeah,
background. The Stanford athletic director got really mad when Cal denied that we'd ever agreed that we were going to discriminate against our black student athletes. And he claimed that the reason that they'd entered, well, let me quote, without notice, California entered a Negro at the last moment, apparently with the expectation that we would default the bout again. So basically, we were trying to cheat because we knew they wouldn't compete against him.
right,
As if, like I said before, as if we didn't have to work. Like with Walter Gordon, he was the state champion, and you're telling us,
yeah,
"Oh, well, you thought you couldn't win fair, so you would default." And there's no
right.
reason to think that. I mean, Errol Jones was a good boxer. He won matches at UCLA and other places, so there's no doubt he was competitive. So the idea. So basically, he accused Cal of trying to cheat, because we knew they wouldn't compete against the black boxer.
It just became such a public hullabaloo where all of a sudden, everyone was aware of what was going on with all the newspapers noting it and everyone was chiming in. And the Daily Cal in particular had
Right.
this
The
wonderful
Daily
quote.
Cal got mad
Right,
because Stanford had accused us of cheating.
right,
And the
right.
Daily Cal's like, "No way, that is not what's going on here at all, bro.
Right. Well, their quote in particular, which is just so good, said, "The athletic policy at California is that any man who is good enough can make a team, irrespective of race or color. California is a state university and does not discriminate either for or against men of another race or color. California will continue to have colored men on its teams in any case where they prove their fitness. This policy will remain unchanged because it is good. The sudden action of Stanford is more than regrettable. It represents a perverted idea of sportsmanship."
That
That
has become my favorite line of this whole thing, a
right.
perverted idea of sportsmanship. And you know what? It's true.
It's
I
true.
mean, quite
Right.
apart from kind of being snarky towards Stanford and all of that, it, you know, it makes me
Right.
kind of
As it
proud,
should.
that, yeah, and
Right.
Cal in 1923 was saying, hey, this is just wrong, what
Right.
you're trying to
And
do.
and not that the university, was all wonderful when it came to discrimination. Of
Oh
course,
God,
had its
no, not
own
at all. I
problems.
mean, we have
Right.
plenty,
So
we
just
can't
to
we can't run
admit
around saying, oh, we were so good.
that's right. That's
Um,
right. Not
I mean,
not
we
at
at
all.
the same time we're making these grandiose statements about, well, if you're good enough to get into Cal, you're good enough to be on any team. We were
Right.
also not letting Black students live in the student housing where the white students were.
Exactly.
So that's not
Exactly.
exactly the same
Right.
attitude. And we
Right. But
weren't.
at least in this instance, it was really good that we took a stand and we were on the right side of this for sure.
Absolutely. I mean, this is, and the fact that it got so much publicity, I think was a good thing. It made, that it was a
Right.
big deal all around the Bay Area. Uh, it wasn't just some little thing between these two schools. It became like a cause for the whole Bay Area
Well,
of
absolutely
this is
right.
just
And
wrong.
it may be even part of the, genesis of why this part of the country is as liberal minded as it is, even. I mean, when you think about it from way back in that era and got that much attention in the media and people were talking about it and saying that this is unjust and not right.
So after the Daily Cal's attack on Stanford, the perverted idea of sportsmanship editorial, which again, what's cool about that is that was not some bureaucrat doing that. That's a student newspaper, and those were the feelings of the students, at least a portion of the students at that time. But the Stanford Daily, which is their student paper, was enraged that they got attacked. So they struck back. And there's a great quote from them. They said it's a fairness issue, that it's not fair to the boxers to make them compete against black boxers, I guess. And they wrote an editorial. Let me see if I can find. Yes. They mocked the indignation and sonorous proclamations of racial equality coming from Berkeley as dishonest. Um, and they concluded the existence of race prejudice cannot be denied, whether or not it is justified. Promoting bouts between men of different colors can do nothing but antagonize that feeling. There is not the close contact in other branches of athletics and not the personal element, which does not enter so strongly. So, in other words, okay, if they were a football player or a baseball player, but we're not letting a black man have the chance to punch a white man. That's just not going to happen. Not at
Right.
Stanford. And they basically called us Cal a bunch of hypocrites because we weren't really. I don't know what exactly their basis for that was, but
Yeah.
they just said
Well,
it.
it's almost like, they made this decision and then they kind of just doubled down on it and, it just stuck with that, especially in light of the bad press that was being generated, I think, as a result of that. And it's kind of like human nature. And if you're told, oh, that's a bad idea, and you go and do it anyway, and then the rest of the world looks at you and says, oh, that was probably a pretty bad idea.
Although, to be honest, in 1923, I don't think the rest of the world, quote unquote, would necessarily have been on the side of Cal in this instance. I think a
Right.
probably
That's
a
true.
substantial majority of Americans would have been on Stanford's side because
Yeah, that's true.
that was the
That's true.
reality of the world at that time. I think that makes it even more exciting that Cal was doing the right thing.
That's right.
And again, the
That's right.
Stanford Daily took the position that their boxers would really resent the whole thing because they would feel that California was entering Negroes merely to win unfairly. Now that
Yeah,
again, we're going to forfeit. We will
right.
refuse. We're discriminating against your athletes. We're not going to. We refuse to compete against them. Therefore, that means you're cheating. Like, excuse me.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
You
Having to
could
do some
always
mental
just,
gymnastics there.
go compete against them like everybody else does.
Right, right. Well, and as I understand it, it wasn't just Stanford. Apparently, it was with Earl Jones. There was another match, I guess, right?
At USC
Against
that where they
right,
forfeited against him. Yes.
right, right,
But then on that same trip, they went and competed against the Southern Branch, which was what UCLA was officially called at that time, and they did compete, and Errol Jones won his match and won every single round.
right,
So he was
right.
obviously a good boxer. He was
Totally.
and
Well, it's just
he's an interesting guy. He ended up going to law school, became a lawyer, and then after practicing for a while, he went to New York City, became a journalist for the New York Age, which was the largest African American newspaper in the United States at that time. And eventually he came back to the Bay Area and worked at the United States Court of Appeal, the Ninth Circuit, for a number of years, which is cool. And actually
yeah.
ran for Congress in, I think, 1958 unsuccessfully, but still he had an
Okay.
active career. He was obviously a bright guy, accomplished guy. And kind of fun note is that in 1952, he and one of his former teammates, a guy named Saul Silverman, they arranged a grand reunion, it was called, of all the boxers and wrestlers from the early days. So not just a class, but a whole, like, from the teens and 20s. And they had a big event at the Palace Hotel. And when you read the list, it's like, man, we had some amazing boxers at Cal, amazing people who were boxers at Cal. In
Yes.
addition to, we talked about Walter Gordon extensively, and he was at the reunion along with, of course, Errol Jones. But also other people were. There's a guy named Irving Stone, who was an author, who was a prize-winning author whose novels included The Agony and the Ecstasy and Lust for Life, about artists like Vincent van Gogh and Michelangelo, who was a boxer, and he was at that reunion. There was a guy named Brody Stevens who was on the 1920 football team, the Wonder Team, who caught a 58-yard touchdown pass in the Rose Bowl that year, which at that time was the longest pass ever recorded in college football history, which was
Right.
like a huge phenomenon at the time. And there was also a guy named Jimmy Doolittle at the reunion who had also been a boxer at Cal at the same time as Walter Gordon. And he was an aviation pioneer, first man ever to fly a plane on instruments only, with the windows blacked out, so it was really on instruments, which I can't even imagine. He was the
Wow.
first pilot to fly across the United States. Um, he served in World War II and won the Congressional Medal of Honor and became a four-star general. And yeah, he was on the boxing team. So Cal Boxing
Wow.
has, produced some amazing people.
Pretty darn impressive, that's for sure. And I mean, yeah, I mean, being around the Bay Area for anyone who has been around Oakland Airport, you may be aware of Doolittle Drive, and I guess that's the reason why it's called Doolittle Drive is after him. So that's
I
certainly
guess
an
being,
impressive
my
person as
dad
well.
is a World War II vet, and so I grew up hearing about and a Cal guy, both. So I grew up hearing about Jimmy Doodles. I always thought everybody knew about him, but I
Right.
guess, I'm getting old.
Well, no, and this is actually part of the reason why it's important to share these stories and to talk about these amazing people from the
Well, and
past.
I
And
think, Errol Jones deserves a heck of a lot of credit
yes,
because it can't have been easy to be the
mhm,
subject of all of this. But
right,
obviously, the fact that he and his family filed the lawsuit back when he was a teenager for discrimination, the fact that he came to Cal, that he was a student at Cal, that he graduated and went to law school, which doesn't sound like that big of a deal when you just say it. But for a black man in the 1920s, of all the
that's right.
disadvantages and discrimination that they suffered, that was an incredible accomplishment. So he seems like a really remarkable guy who really should be remembered, and his whole team should be remembered because good for them.
Absolutely. But no, I love this. I love that you took the time to research all of this on your own to find out all of this information because, like you said, you couldn't find that anyone else had really written about this.
Not
So,
as far as I could find, and I am kind of smug about that. My own little bit of historical, contribution to the history of the world. How's that for being
absolutely.
modest?
Well, you should be. And no, I just love the fact that you join us from time to time here on the podcast because that's what it's all about is to shine a light on these amazing people from the past and to make sure that they're not forgotten because there's just so much tremendous history and the traditions of the University of California and just have you to thank so much, Leslie, for making the
And never
time.
forget that Stanford has a perverted idea of sportsmanship. We need a
That's
sign
right.
that says that or something for the next big game.
Next game day.
There you go.
Well, hey, no, thank you so much, Leslie. We appreciate you and go Bears.
Go Bears.
I always love spending time with Leslie and learning more about the rich history of our university. And it's always especially fun when we can share stories that cast Stanford in a less than positive light. Thank you so much for tuning in today. We appreciate all of you out there listening and watching. And remember, if you live in Richmond, please give your vote to my co-host, Ahmad Anderson, to be the next mayor of Richmond. There's no question he will do wonders for the city of pride and purpose. This podcast is entirely a labor of love and a reflection of how much we love our university. Please help grow this podcast by telling the whole damn world about us. Just tell your friends to go to tellthewholedamnworld.com. And you can always go to our YouTube channel to watch any of our previous episodes. We celebrate all things Cal and the prominent people who are passionate about the University of California. Do you feel Cal is the center of the universe? Do you bleed blue and gold? We want you to tell the whole damn world about it. Go Bears! You know it!